Have you ever wondered why native English speakers sound so natural and effortless, while language learners often come across as a bit stiff or disconnected? The secret isn't just in vocabulary or grammar, it lies in the use of connectors, those subtle words and phrases that make speech flow smoothly, add nuance, and keep listeners engaged. In this lesson, you'll discover 50 unique connectors that natives use every day but are rarely taught in standard textbooks. Some of them might completely transform the way you speak English, making your conversations not only fluent but also far more captivating. Idea 1. The power of connectors in real conversation. When you think about learning English, you probably picture memorizing vocabulary lists, studying grammar rules, and practicing pronunciation. While all of these are important, there's a hidden skill that can instantly elevate the way you communicate: mastering connectors. These are the little bridges between your ideas, words and phrases like, as a matter of fact, on top of that, or having said that. At first glance, they might seem small or even unnecessary, but in reality, they're the glue that holds a conversation together. Without them, your speech can feel like a series of disconnected sentences. With them, your ideas flow naturally, creating a rhythm that's pleasant to listen to and easy to follow. Imagine two people telling the same story. The first person gives you the events one by one. I went to the store, I bought some fruit, I met a friend, we had coffee. You understand the sequence, but it feels mechanical, almost like reading bullet points. Now picture the second person using connectors. I went to the store, and on top of that, I found the freshest fruit I've seen all year. As a matter of fact, while I was there, I bumped into an old friend, and what's more, we ended up having a lovely coffee together. Suddenly, the story feels alive. There's a sense of connection between events, a smoothness that makes you want to keep listening. Native speakers use connectors without thinking, they're second nature. This means that if you want to sound more like them, you need to not only learn these expressions but also practice using them until they become automatic. The beauty of connectors is that they work in both casual and formal settings. Whether you're chatting with friends, giving a presentation, or writing an email, the right connector can make your message clearer, more persuasive, and more engaging. Take as a matter of fact, for example. This phrase adds emphasis, corrects a misconception, or introduces a surprising detail. If someone says, "I thought you didn't like coffee," you could just reply, "I like coffee," but saying, "As a matter of fact, I love coffee," creates a stronger, more polished impression. It feels more confident, more precise, and more native-like. Learning connectors isn't about memorizing a dry list. It's about understanding their purpose and practicing them in context. Try noticing them in movies, podcasts, or conversations, and then challenge yourself to use them the next time you speak. You might start small, adding just one or two to your speech. Over time, you'll find that your sentences naturally weave together, your thoughts flow effortlessly, and your listeners stay more engaged. Connectors are more than just language tools. They're conversation enhancers. Mastering them can make the difference between being understood and being remembered. And in your English journey, that's a skill worth having. Idea 2. Building depth and nuance with connectors. In the first part, we uncovered how connectors can transform a plain sequence of sentences into a fluid, engaging narrative. But connectors are not just about linking ideas. They also allow you to add depth, nuance, and personality to your speech. This is where your English truly begins to shine. Think about how you express contrast or balance in everyday life. In your native language, you probably have many ways to acknowledge one point while presenting another. In English, connectors like "having said that," "even so," and "be that as it may" perform this exact function. They let you admit one truth but immediately introduce another idea that gives your statement more complexity. For instance, saying "the job requires long hours," "having said that, the pay is excellent," feels balanced and fair. You're not simply complaining about the hours, you're presenting a full picture. Similarly, "even so" adds an element of determination or surprise in the face of a challenge. "The weather was terrible. Even so, we went hiking." This shows perseverance and makes your story more memorable. Without these connectors, your sentences might sound flat, leaving out the emotional or logical shifts that make a conversation interesting. Another powerful way connectors add nuance is by specifying details with precision. Words like namely, specifically, and in particular, let you zoom in on the exact part of your message you want the listener to notice. If you say, "We need to improve our performance, specifically in customer service," you're not just giving a vague instruction, you're directing attention to a clear priority. This level of clarity not only makes your English sound more professional, but also helps your listener remember what's important. Connectors also have the magical ability to add weight to your statements. Expressions such as, "What's more on top of that," and not to mention stack your points for greater impact. She's an excellent teacher. What's more, she inspires her students to think for themselves. Each phrase builds on the last, making your praise more compelling. It's like layering brushstrokes on a painting. The image becomes richer with every addition. When you start combining connectors, your language becomes more dynamic. You could say, "The conference was informative, not to mention, a great networking opportunity. On top of that, the location was stunning." Here, you're not only communicating facts, you're painting a complete and engaging picture. The key is to practice these connectors in context, just like we did with the examples in Idea 1. Don't try to force them into every sentence, but do challenge yourself to use at least one or two when you tell a story, share an opinion, or explain a process. The more you experiment, the more naturally they'll fit into your speech. By mastering these subtle tools, you'll discover that connectors aren't just linguistic accessories. They're powerful wise and Friday. Idea 3. Structuring your message for maximum clarity. In Idea 2, we explored how connectors add nuance, depth, and emotional layers to your speech. Now let's take it one step further, using connectors to structure your ideas so your message becomes crystal clear from beginning to end. This is where your English moves from sounding natural to sounding truly professional. When we communicate, clarity is just as important as fluency. Even if you have a rich vocabulary and perfect pronunciation, if your ideas are scattered, your listener may lose track. That's where structural connectors like first and foremost, subsequently, prior to, meanwhile, and in the interim come in. These connectors are like signposts on a road. They guide your listener through the journey of your message without confusion. Take first and foremost, for example. This connector signals your most important point right from the start. If you say, "First and foremost, we must ensure customer safety," your audience knows instantly what matters most. It sets a clear priority and shows you're organized in your thinking. Then there's subsequently, which is perfect for showing cause and effect sequences or chronological order. The report was submitted and subsequently a meeting was scheduled. This tells your listener exactly what happened next, without needing long explanations. Structural connectors also help you handle parallel events. Words like meanwhile create a vivid picture of two things happening at the same time. I was setting up the presentation. Meanwhile, my colleague was preparing the handouts. It's like showing two camera angles in a movie. You give your listener a fuller scene. And don't underestimate the power of time markers like prior to or in the interim. Prior to launching the campaign, we tested it with a small group. Or, we're waiting for the new equipment. In the interim, we're using the old system. These phrases keep your message logical and easy to follow. When you combine structural connectors with the nuance connectors we discussed earlier, your speech becomes both well-organized and richly expressive. For example, first and foremost, we reviewed our goals. Subsequently, we made changes to the plan, not to mention adding new features. Meanwhile, the design team was working on the final visuals. This sequence not only tells the story clearly, but also adds texture and engagement. Practicing structural connectors is straightforward. Start by outlining your ideas in steps. What comes first, what follows, what happens at the same time, and choose a connector to fit each relationship. Then, practice saying your outline aloud, making sure your voice and pauses highlight the connector. The goal is to make these words a natural part of how you organize your thoughts. By mastering this skill, you'll ensure that your listener not only understands you, but also remembers your points in the order you intended. Clear structure plus engaging delivery is a winnie. Idea 4. Explaining causes and effects with precision. In Idea 3, we explored how connectors can structure your message so that it flows in a clear, logical order. Now it's time to focus on another powerful function of connectors, explaining why something happens and what results from it. Cause and effect connectors allow you to present your ideas persuasively, show relationships between events, and guide your listener toward your conclusion. Think of a conversation where someone shares an opinion without explaining the reasoning behind it. You might understand their point, but without knowing the cause, it feels incomplete. By using connectors like given that, consequently, on account of, thereby, and as a result of which, you're not just stating facts, you're connecting the dots for your listener. Take given that. This connector introduces a fact or circumstance that explains your next statement. For example, given that the economy is unstable, we need to be careful with our investments. You're not simply saying we need to be careful, you're showing the logical reason behind it. This makes your statement more convincing and harder to argue against. Then there's consequently, which links an action directly to its result. She didn't study for the exam, consequently she performed poorly. The cause and effect are unmistakable. It's a clean, professional way to show the connection between events, especially in business or academic contexts. On account of is another useful option, often used to explain a decision or event based on a specific factor. The game was postponed on account of the heavy rain. Here, you're highlighting the cause without adding unnecessary details. For more formal communication, thereby is incredibly efficient. It condenses an action and its result into one neat sentence. He improved his skills, thereby increasing his chances of promotion. It's concise, elegant, and shows a direct link between effort and outcome. And if you need to emphasize a result that follows from a particular situation, as a result of which works beautifully. She practiced every day, as a result of which her English improved dramatically. This form is especially effective when you want to sound precise and well-structured. When you combine cause and effect connectors with the structural ones from Idea 3, your speech becomes both organized and persuasive. For example, first and foremost, we identified the key issues. Given that communication was a major problem, we introduced new tools. Consequently, team productivity increased, thereby boosting overall morale. This sequence clearly shows the journey from problem to solution to result. Practicing these connectors is simple but powerful. When you tell a story or explain a decision, pause to think, what caused this? What happened because of it? Then choose a connector to make that relationship explicit. Over time, you'll find your explanations sound more logical, your arguments stronger. Idea 5. Summarizing, concluding, and leaving a lasting impression.
In Idea 4, we explored how cause and effect connectors strengthen your reasoning and make your message persuasive. Now, let's focus on the final stage of communication. How to bring everything together, wrap it up with clarity, and leave your listener with something memorable. This is where summarizing and concluding connectors come in. They're the finishing touch that turns a good conversation into one that sticks in the mind.
When you reach the end of a story, presentation, or discussion, your listener's attention naturally starts to shift. If you don't close with intention, your most important points can fade away. Connectors like all things considered, in a nutshell, ultimately to recap, and on the whole signal that you're about to sum up or draw a conclusion, helping your audience refocus on the key message.
Take all things considered. It shows you've weighed every factor before making your judgment. All things considered, the project was a success despite the challenges. This not only summarizes but also reassures your listener that your view is balanced. In a nutshell is perfect for informal conversations. It condenses a long explanation into one clear statement. It was a complicated process, but in a nutshell, we achieved our goal. It's friendly, concise, and listener-friendly. When you want to emphasize the final or most important outcome, ultimately is your go-to connector. We tried many strategies, but ultimately, the simplest one worked best. It tells your audience, here's the bottom line. To recap is great for quickly reviewing your main points, especially after a detailed discussion. To recap, we identified the problem, implemented a solution, and saw positive results. This is especially effective in meetings or teaching situations where retention matters. Finally, on the whole offers a gentle reflective summary. The weather was unpredictable, but on the whole, the trip was enjoyable. It leaves your listener with a broad, balanced perspective. When you combine these concluding connectors with the cause and effect phrases from Idea 4, your closing becomes powerful and persuasive. For example, given that customer engagement was low, we redesigned the campaign. Consequently, sales improved significantly. All things considered, it was one of our most successful projects this year. This sequence tells the full story, cause, result, and conclusion, in a clear and compelling way. To practice, take any story or presentation you've already told and rewrite its ending using at least 2 concluding connectors. Notice how they help you tighten the message and leave a stronger impression. You can also listen for these connectors in podcasts, speeches, or news broadcasts. They're everywhere once you start paying attention. Mastering concluding connectors is like learning the final flourish of a dance. They give your words a sense of completion, guiding your listener.